So in this video, we learn how to solve for the integrals of functions using the method of integration by parts. So first of all, you are going to derive the general formula which is used for integration by parts. Then afterwards, we try some few examples to help us understand better. So to generate the general formula for integration by parts, let's recall the chain rule. The chain rule from differentiation. So from differentiation, we know that when you have a function of the form f of x, then g of x, and then you want to find the derivative of this function, that will be the derivative of this function, that will be equal to f of x times what? G prime of what? X. Okay, plus f prime of what? X times g of what? X. This is what is known as the product rule. Okay, this is what is known as the product rule. And you know, when I take the integral of what we have here, okay, when I take the integral of what we have here, it will give me back the function f of x, g of x. Okay, so one thing you should know is that when you take the integral of the first derivative of a function, it will give you the function. So let's look at this. Let's try an example for what I said. So let's say I have a function f of x to be equal to 3x squared. Okay, and I take the first derivative of this function, which will be f prime of what? X. This will be equal to what? 3 times 2x to the power of 2 minus 1. Right? Okay, so this will give me 3 times 2x to the power 1. And that will be equal to what? 6x. So this is the first derivative of what? This function here. So now when I take the integral of this, which will be the integral of what? 6x dx. This will give me 6x to the power 1 plus 1 divided by what? 1 plus 1. So this will give me what? 6x to the power 2 divided by 2. And that will be equal to 2 go here 3 times. So then I'll have what? 3x squared. So this is to tell us that what? When you find the integral of the first derivative of the function, it will give us what? The function. So now let's go back and then continue with the deriving of the formula. Okay, so now I know that when I take the integral of this, I'll get what? The function, right? So that would be the integral of f of x times g prime of what? X. Okay, plus f prime of x times g of x. Okay, so when I take the integral of this dx, this should give me what? f of x g of what? X. Right, so when I take the integral of the first derivative of the function, it should give me what? The function. So I'm going to rewrite this as, I'm going to rewrite this in the form, the integral of f of x g prime of what? X dx. Okay, plus the integral of f prime of what? X g of x dx. This is equal to what? F of x times what? G of what? X. So it's just this integral function that I have here that I wrote this as this way. Okay, so you can just separate them. Okay, so you see this side they were together, but here I just separated them. Okay, so what I'll do next is that I'm going to take what you have here, okay, to the right side. Okay, I'll take this value here to the right side. So let's look at what will happen there. So at the end, I'll have the integral of what? F of x times what? G prime of x dx to be equal to what? F of x times g of x minus what? F, so minus the integral of what? F prime of what? X times what? G of x dx. Okay, so what we have here, Okay, it's known as what? The formula for what? Integration by parts. So this will be the formula for the integration by parts. So this is the formula that we are going to use to answer any question that involves integration by parts. So from here, let's look at what we can do. We can actually simplify this formula here. Okay, we can represent this with some variables. So from here, I can say that what? Let f of x equals what? U. Okay, and I will say let g of what? X to equal to what? V. Okay, so when I find f prime of x, which will be the f of x over what? The x, right? So let me write this as du over what? The x. Okay, du over the x. This should be equal to what? F prime of what? X. Okay, when I find the first derivative of this function, it will be the same as what? Du over dx. Okay, so let's go to this side also. So g prime of x, g prime of x will be the same as what? V over what? Dx, right? Which will be equal to what? G prime of what? X. So what you are going to do here is that you are just going to what? Substitute everything that we have here in place of what? This formula. So let's look at that. Okay, so from this formula, okay, I'm going to write this formula here. So the integral of what? F of x. And you know f of x to be what? U. So I do that will be u times what? G prime of x. And g prime of x is what? Dv over what? Dx. So that will be times what? Dv over what? Dx. Okay, times this dx that we have here. That's times what? Dx. Okay, equals what? F of x, which is what? U times what? F of x, which is what? U times what? G of x, which is what? V. Okay, minus the integral of what? F prime of x. And f prime of x is what? Du over what? Dx. Okay, times what? G of x, which is what? V. So times V times what? This is the x that we have here. So times what? Dx. Okay, so let me take away this. Sorry for some more space. Okay, so now let's go ahead and simplify this. So I can actually cancel out these two. Then I'll have what? The integral to be what? U times what? Dv. Okay, so this will be equal to what? U times V minus. I can also cancel out these two. So this will be minus the integral of what? V times what? Du. So the formula I got from the beginning is that same formula that I have simplified as what we have here. So with this knowledge, let's go ahead and then try some examples. Okay, so now let's try this question I have on the screen. So we are going to apply the formula that we proved earlier on. That's the formula for integration by parts. Okay, which was given to be, let's see, the integral of what? F of x times g prime of what? X dx equals f of x times what? G of x minus the integral of what? The integral of g of x, okay, times the first derivative of what? X dx. Okay, so this is the general formula. So what you are going to do here is that you are going to find g of x and then f of x. Okay, this is because from this question here you can see that what we're already giving f of x and then g prime of x. So let's see what I'm talking about. So from here, okay, I can separate this into two. I can split this into two. Now see that what f of x. Now see that f of x is equal to what? X, and then g prime of what? X equals what? The sine of what? X. Okay, so this is what I have here. Okay, so looking at this side, let's look at what we need. We need f of x and then g of x. We already have f of x, but I don't have g of x. Okay, and then we don't have g of x here. Okay, we don't have what? F prime of what? X also. So what you are looking for here is now is what? F prime of x and then g of x. When you get f prime of x and then g of x, we can come and substitute into this formula, then we get our answer. So let's look at that. So how are you going to get f prime of x? F prime of x is simply the first derivative of this function that we have here. So f prime of x will be what? The derivative of what? X. That will be what? 1. Okay, and then let's find out g prime of what? X. For us to find g prime of x, that will be the integral or antiderivative of what? This function that I have here. So when we find the antiderivative of the first derivative of the function, it will give us what? The function, like I said earlier on. So I'm going to find the antiderivative of what? This function here. Okay, so g of x will be equal to what? The antiderivative of what? Sine of what? X. Okay, the antiderivative of what? Sine of what? X. Okay, and that'll give me what? Negative cosine of what? X. So that's the value for what? Our g of x. So what you will do now is that you have to substitute what you've gotten here into the formula. Okay, so you're going to put g of x here and then f prime of what? X here. So you're going to substitute everything into this general formula. So let's look at that. Okay, so clean this. Alright, so the general formula is the integral of f of x times g prime of what? X dx. Okay, it was f of x. Okay, but I know f of x to be what? X. Okay, and then g of x to be what? Negative cosine of x. So let me make this as what? Minus x cosine of what? X. Okay, alright, minus the integral of what? G of x. Okay, and g of x is what? Minus cosine of what? X times what? F prime of x, which is what? 1. So that would be what? Times 1. But we can ignore this one. Okay, since negative cosine x times 1 will still give us what? Negative cosine x. So this times what? The x. So now from here, what you have to do next is to simplify what I have on this right side here. Okay, when we simplify this, then it will be easy for us to get our final answer. So let's look at what will happen. So negative minus x cosine of what? X. Okay, so I'm going to bring this negative here to this side. So at the end of it, I'll have what? Plus the integral of what? Cosine of what? X dx. Okay, so from there, we know that what? The integral of what? Cosine will give me what? Sine of x plus c. So this will be equal to minus x cosine of x plus what? The integral of what? Cosine of x. That will be what? Sine of x plus c. Okay, so at the end, this will be our final answer. So now this, what you have here, will be our final answer. So that's how to apply the integration by parts formula. Okay, so let's take another example. So the next example I have here is you should find the integral of what? The natural log of x. So you should find the integral for the natural log of what? X. So you are going to apply the same formula we used for the previous question. Okay, that's the integration by parts formula. Okay, so let me write this formula down so that it should be easy for us to refer. Okay, so the formula was given to be the integral of what? F of x times g prime of what x dx, okay, equals what f of x times g of x minus the integral of what g of x times f prime of what x dx. Okay, so this is the formula that you are going to apply here. So first of all, let's look at this and then look at what you have been given. Okay, so I can write this as the integral of what natural log of x times 1 dx, right? Okay, so when I have this, I'll take my f of x to be equal to what natural log of what x, that's ln x, and then I'll take my g prime of what x to be equal to what 1. Okay, so from here you realize that we need g of x, okay, because we have f of x already, and then we need what f prime of what x. So let's go ahead and then find f prime of x and then g of x. So for f prime of x, that'll be what the first derivative of what the ln of x. So that'll give me x prime over what x, and you know x prime is what 1, so that'll give me 1 over what x. Okay, so now let's find the function g of x. Okay, and you know when you find the antiderivative or the first derivative of the function, that'll give you what the function. So g of x will be equal to what the antiderivative of what the first derivative of the function, that will be the antiderivative of 1 dx. Okay, and that'll give us what x. Alright, so when we find the antiderivative of 1, that gives us what x. So that tells us that what g of x equals what x. Okay, so now that we have g of x and then f prime, let's come and substitute it into the general formula. Okay, so we have everything that we need here. So now let's come and substitute them into the formula and then simplify it. So I have the integral of what ln of x dx, okay, to be equal to f of x, which is what ln of x times what g of x, which is times x. So let me actually write this as x times natural log of what x, okay, minus the integral of what g of x, and g of x is given to be x, okay, that's g of x here, times f prime of what x, and then f prime of what x, and f prime of x is 1 over x, so that's times what 1 over what x dx. Okay, so from here I have this to be equal to what x times ln of what x minus the antiderivative of this. Let me write this as x over what x dx. Okay, so this will actually cancel out at the end. I have what 1. So let me erase this and then make it times the antiderivative of what 1 dx. Okay, so this will give me x times the natural log of what x minus for the antiderivative of what 1, which will give me what x plus what c. So at the end this will be our final answer. Okay, so now let's look at this question also. So I'll start by writing out the general formula. So the general formula was the integral of what f of x times g prime of what x dx. Okay, this should be equal to what f of x times g of x minus what the integral of what g of x times what times the first derivative of what x dx. So this is the general formula. So from the question we've been given, I'm going to represent f of x as what x. So I'll say that what f of x equals what x, and then let's represent g prime of x also with exponent of what x. So from here you can see that what you have f of x already, but you don't have g of x, and then we don't have f prime of what x also. So our main focus will be on finding f prime of x and then g of x. And you can find f prime of x by taking the first derivative of what this function. So that will be f prime of x. This will give me 1. Okay, and then let's find g of x here. And you know this is g prime of x. Okay, that's the first derivative of the function. And you know when you take the antiderivative of the first derivative of the function. That will give us what the function itself. So we are going to take the antiderivative of this. So that will be g of x will be equal to the antiderivative of what? E to the power x. And that's to give me what? E to the power of x. Okay, so what we do here is that we're now going to substitute all these values into this formula here, then we simplify our answer. So let's see what we have at the end. I'll try to read something here. Okay, alright, so now let's look at that. So from the general formula, that's the integral of what? F of x. In this case, that was what? X times what? E to the power x dx. Okay, will be equal to what? F of x times g of x, and f of x is x, so that what? X times g of x, that's times exponent of what? X. Okay, minus the integral of what? G of x, so that's integral of what? E to the power x times f prime of x, which is 1. Okay, that's times 1 dx. Okay, so this will actually give me x times e to the power x minus the integral of what? E to the power x dx. Okay, so let's simplify this. So I have what? X times e to the power x minus the integral of what? E to the power x. That will be what? E to the power x plus what? C. So this will be our final answer.